confido et sperabo semper, da mihi virtutem et pacem, adversis in temporibus sustinere, lumen tuum dirigere, spes aeterna cor meum implere, fiduciam habeo in misericordia tua, et semper laudabo nomen tuum. Spiro spero Domine, in te confido et sperabo semper, da mihi virtutem et pacem, adversis in temporibus sustinere, lumen tuum dirigere, spes aeterna cor meum implere.
Good evening to those who are present here at Figueira and those who accompany us on YouTube and Instagram. We are carrying forward a cycle of instruction based on the Esoteric Glossary, which is a book that helps us make a synthesis and a bridge between what we know as classical spirituality and this moment of transition which the planet and humanity are going through. And today we'll conclude that approach about the tests according to the nature of the race and lineages, and we'll enter the topic of the evolutionary plan, what this evolutionary plan is, what it means to us, because it's important not only for us to awaken to this, but also to recover or find again this identity which, bottom line, determines our trajectory, which we must follow and accomplish. So, to to deal with the evolutionary plan, there are some entries in the glossary that help us recognize what is around it. So one very important point that we have to reconsider is our understanding about the concept of hierarchy. The word hierarchy is worn out, so to say, from the point of view of the instruction, because it brings some deviations of the human nature and condition related to the energy of power, authority over others and things, whereas hierarchy is something that's much broader than this. As we'll see from a question, it's important that we may mature our discernment and reflection about some things, rather than be pushed in the face of concepts of the collective consciousness, which only brings us a restriction of our potential for knowing things firsthand and experience all this, instead of being limited by the collective consciousness. So around this impulse, this state of consciousness and of the hierarchy, we can find many entries in the glossary that can help us finding again within ourselves our bond with this. As for example, hierarchical levels, venerable, elders, councils, the lords of karma. So the glossary places us before through a real inner library, so to say, which could give us a support that is very important the moment we human beings receive loose impulses without continuity, without any deep support, disconnected information that does not lead our consciousness to our own inner world, which should be the goal for every instruction or any mystical religious movement or magical movement in the good sense of the word magical. And besides that, this hierarchical level, for example, Lords of Karma is an extremely important level. We know what it means and how it refers to us or relates to us in our daily lives, because precisely on this level of evolution of humanity as a whole, our past is known, our experience, our current experience is accompanied, and our future is determined. So we shouldn't follow our human process, continuing to ignore the existence of the hierarchy, which we can contact with first with intention, and then depending on our dedication to all these topics. And the glossary also places us before evolutionary tasks, the concept of what a revelation is, when we contact a revelation, when this impulse reaches us. Why does it reach us? For us to have one more piece of information, or for us to better serve this plan, which is already existing on some plane of consciousness. Another entry that is very important is planetary purification. So all of us human beings incarnated on this time, in this time, we can observe how the planet is going through a kind of collapse, a kind of purification, and many times something in us does not understand this, and again, dragged by the collective consciousness, we interpret, we judge, we take a position, whereas the planet demands a purification. See the wealth of this book, something a little more connected to some segments of this spiritual quest, which is the reappearance of Christ. But what is this, after all? He himself would have said that 2,000 years ago that he would return. So what is this reappearance of Christ? All of this is in the glossary. Today, will change the dynamics of the sharing a little, first answering some questions which I understand are important or useful to all of us, and then we'll enter the topic in itself. One person had a dream that is very interesting and is the following. They were on a horse climbing a slope, and as they reached the top, they saw that they were sitting backwards. They were looking backwards, looking to the back part of the horse. So they had a reflex and changed and moved around it themselves and started looking towards the head of the horse, and they saw themselves walking or riding along a more horizontal path. It may mean that when we are not a little more consciously leading the movement of our thoughts, emotions, and actions, this aspect that is more instinctive or greedy may search artificially a slope, in other words, a harder path, while our consciousness is turning back, is looking at the past, our previous experience. And at a certain point, when we reverse the situation and we accompany the movement of the bodies in leading ourselves, the more horizontal plane appears, something that corresponds to us at this moment, something fluid that we are leading the horse, our vehicles, towards a certain direction. So this is a great warning for all of us. Whenever someone has a dream, something concerns ourselves also. So sitting backwards on a horse and letting it follow its path alone while we are busy with the past will not lead us to this horizontal path that is fluid and harmonious. This is a very interesting dream. And here, about the topic of our relationship with what we call the other kingdoms of nature, the animals in their different expressions, the plants and minerals. Someone asks, what is this process like in a more edifying relationship with these kingdoms, because a person observes this cruelty, this indifference, the abuse, violence, and the suffering disturbs them a bit. And how can we relate with the other kingdoms in a healthy way? Humanity as a whole has still not discovered, has not awakened to an inherent condition of the planet on which we are incarnated and evolving, which is a condition that includes the existence of the other kingdoms. Therefore, it would suggest a harmonious and intelligent relationship with all of them. So we cannot expect something different from all these codes mentioned by the person when we do not even understand the inherent nature of the planet on which we are experiencing and learning something from this school. So, as we can see these expressions also as an expression of this evolutionary plan, as we were saying before. In other words, these kingdoms and species also have a plan for them, even if we do not know it, but there is a plan for them. So, for example, something studied in the glossary also in our relationship with the animal kingdom, if we have a constructive relationship that is not abusive, considering that there is a life in expression in it, eventually this coexistence may sow in this animal, which is an expression of a group soul, which is also in the glossary, the definition of a group soul, a seed of a mental body, So the animal is invited to generate in its consciousness a seed of a mental body through the quality of our thought, of our reflection. And in the case of the emotional body, depending on the quality of our feelings, we can also channel and help this animal to generate a positive feeling and softening the influence of the instinct in its expression. Of course, humanity as a whole does even dream about it because it does not know that there is an evolutionary plan, or think that the evolutionary plan will only benefit human beings but does not bring a coherent sense of the relationship with the other types of life as a whole. So as we do not work higher thoughts and feelings in us, eventually we cannot collaborate with the other kingdoms because we do not even work this on ourselves. And we'll see a little more about this in the question that we'll see right away. The person says, what is judgment within the collective mental body? How can we receive these thoughts and not become involved with it also? How to avoid it and how to perceive it. We are going through a mental stage. This race is a mental race. And the mind has many levels, as we must have already noticed. And one of these levels is discernment. Our learning to discern and have a reference over where we put our will and our thought, to define a criterion of opportunity for what we have a thought, what we want to think about, rather than something thinking in us, which is what usually happens. So in the entry levels of consciousness in the glossary, we'll see that our mind is a part of the collective mental, the planetary mental. Therefore, we are a cell of this collective mental body. And if it is developed individually, it starts to be more selective instead of being absorbed by the collective world, and we becoming dragged to what is not correct for us. According to the entry of magnetism in the glossary, we start forming another kind of mental body, another kind of thought, and we'll be able to discern if that which is crossing our mental body is a part of this judgment or collective thought, or if it's something that I can consciously accompany. This starts at this moment. Do this exercise. Where is your mind right now? Is it here or is it thinking of something else? How can we expect to be disconnected from the collective mental body if any mental wind that comes drags us and we release? It's not a control. We release this attention over what we are thinking. So if we learn to accompany what we are thinking, we'll enter this state of meditative consciousness, prayerful consciousness in a natural way, because we are accompanying the thought. If that does not have any consistency according to our values, that will dissolve. And this space will emerge to strengthen our thoughts and intentions. So, if we exercise discernment, and if we consolidate reflective processes, rather than seeing ourselves dragged around by the collective consciousness, but if we give consistency to this reflection, defining mental priorities, we may be able to avoid this collective process so that we do not see ourselves involved in things that are not correspondent to us. And an interesting question, what is anxiety in the spiritual terms? This is a very important question. returning to the entry levels of consciousness, we need to know that on each level that our consciousness exists, it interacts with a different kind of will, with something that determines or impels us to an action. So here, on the conscious plane, we have a very mixed will with an emotional will, which is our desire, with a mental will, which is an aspiration or a memory that impels us to repeat that experience, and a more polished will, which is the will of the integrated personality, as we saw in the previous sharing, to align with the higher will. So, this spiritual anxiety, following the reflection of the question, this may reflect a disconnection among our levels of consciousness. So on the inner levels, our inner world, our soul or our spirit contacts a will, an impulse, and that has a rhythm of its own, that has an energy of its own, that transports a state of consciousness of its own. When in our conscious life we are not connected with this higher will or open to our higher level, this lack of rhythm or lack of consonance between our inner world and higher level may cause this kind of spiritual anxiety, which we do not know where it comes from. We perceive a higher impulse, but as we are not aligned or as we do not seek our inner world, we may come across a kind of spiritual anxiety. And the other topic, which is very common in those consciousnesses, we who are seeking something which is different from the life of everyone else. In other words, we have noticed that there is something mysterious to us but exists. We are seeking this. So the result of our aspiration for contacting this activates on the higher plane an impulse, an energy, a state of consciousness that has a different vibration, different from our human part. And as this is an impulse, or in other words, or better, as it generates an impulse of adaptation, of transformation, our personality can interpret it as an anxiety because it's an energy, a state, an impulse that is beyond our current moment. So it's very important for us in a human way not to lose sight of the proportion of what we are on other levels, because if from a higher level a certain impulse comes, this comes accompanied by a magnetism and an energy of transformation of our current state, so that our next step may be a little closer to that impulse. This comes as a help. This distance promotes a magnetism that can, again, be interpreted as a kind of anxiety. And this is why we should not seek higher life out of curiosity or through exercises or strategies, because just suppose this higher energy responds in an energy way or in a vibrational way, but if it's not our true aspiration to contact this higher plane, which only makes sense before the logics of the evolutionary plan. It only makes sense to know other states of consciousness if it is applied or lived within this impulse, this understanding that there exists a plan for nature, for the universe, for the planet. So all of this gains a coherence rather than activating artificially or out of greed a state of consciousness which will not be able to know what to do with it. So eventually, the sensation of spiritual anxiety is a sign that this does not correspond to us, but it was activated, and on some level that responds to our call, but we do not know how to interpret or what to do with that. This is why humility and this responsibility are very important in this process of the spiritual path or the evolutionary plan as a whole. And the last sharing, we studied the second ray, the connections of this, what we call the hierarchical lineages, which are the schools, the environments of learning which our spirits go through. It's as if it were an academic movement on our spiritual level, which we call hierarchical lineages. And we have seen that the one that has greater connection with the first ray and the connection with the second ray, and now we'll try to reach up to the seventh ray, which is the last ray among the material rays. Reminding that these studies does not exhaust these studies, these topics. The idea is to encourage an interest as we consult the glossary and other works of classical spirituality, as we call, so that we may deepen. Here, an impulse for a synthesis is given to generate our contact, inner contact. So the third ray has the filter of active intelligence. It's a ray that's widely known to humanity because as a race, we have developed in previous cycles through the activity and through the passage in the animal kingdom, as the animal kingdom has traits of this, such as impulsiveness, instinct. All of this is an expression of a certain level of intelligence. So in the human kingdom, this intelligent activity is a little more mature and is directed as a certain ability of articulation, clarity in communication, and all of this permeates this concept or this presentation of what we call the third ray. When we mature the third ray in us, or when we have this ray in our constitution, remembering each one of our levels is composed, built with the genetics, so to say, or basic characteristics of a ray. So as when we have the third ray intrinsically built in our nature, we have a correct aspirations for knowledge, so that this knowledge may be applied in our lives and rather than theoretical. So when this ray matures in us, the ray of active intelligence, we have an adherence and an intention that our action may be correct, precise, orderly, may be within a flow, which is the type of test and challenge, that when this ray is not mature in us, it also promotes this challenge. It's the test of disorderly activity that is uncontrolled, many things that are started but are not concluded. All of this is an indication that we lack maturity in the third ray. This is far from being just a preparatory instruction. If we knew all of this, our lives would be completely different. We would know the rays, and we would detect in our daily lives, in our nature, how many times our emotional nature we start an uncontrolled feeling, and this looks like a horse that starts riding around, and we do not know what it relates with. It goes all around. So the third ray in the emotional body, all of us should reflect about this, because as long as we do not train our consciousness, these horses as symbols of our bodies, they take any direction and place us in situations that were not expected for us. The third ray, the test or challenge for the third ray, is also a tendency for dispersion. You start something, then you start something else, and then a third one, a fourth, a fifth one, and then you are shuffling different activities, and we do not even know where you started and why you started it. So this dispersion, distraction, and a loss of concentration, all of these are tests. So at this moment, I, who have a different perspective comparing to you, I perceive when you become distracted from your body language, from your look. It's clear when something takes your consciousness to other places. And I perceive this also without trying. I notice that sometimes we try to be concentrated and something distracts us. So if we want to serve or awaken to the evolutionary plan, we have to remember all of this. Because if we are a part of one life of the same one and universal intelligence, this, more than ourselves, wants us as its collaborators and servers. It's natural. It's nothing exceptional. It's no one's merit. It's part of this great plan that we may identify in an intelligent way what is incumbent on us to live. We are scattered in our attention without concentration. This does not happen. It's important that we reflect this, because at this very moment, the inner world of each one of us is helping us to expand the consciousness. But if we are distracted with something, we do not perceive this. So this ray is a really important ray. The fourth ray, which has the filter of harmony through conflict, the third ray, we find basically three lineages, three schools that our spirit is invited to identify, which is the work with the lineage of the governors, the kingdomists, and the priests. We have seen in the previous sharing what a little more deeply these lineages mean, and the third ray of the governors, which again is not politics. One thing is the governor in the school of our spirit, and something completely different is a name that they have given to governors, or they gave the same name, governors, but it has nothing to do with the lineages. Let it be very clear what we are studying here. So when this lineage is permeating our consciousness on a spiritual level, if we are at the school of the governors, everything is conducted to a precise economic activity from the point of view of energy, articulated and turned and oriented to the common good. So this is an expression of this energy in the lineage of the governors. The priest's ability, in the good sense, or this discernment, inner discernment, to make the laws of many levels to coincide so that the energy may flow, so that there may be an intelligent activity throughout the dimensions. It's the same thing with the other kingdoms, and the lineage of the kingdom is this sensitivity of channeling the energy of the other kingdoms so that it may rise from level to level. Again, the fourth ray, which has as a filter conflict, harmony through conflict. And I stopped a little bit in this definition because in classical spirituality, it was said more than 100 years ago that in this year, precisely 2025, it would be the chronological year, so to say, in which this ray would emerge with a lot of power. So we are here, as I said in the previous sharing, with 130 conflicts throughout the world, although we do not know the details about all of this. So the tendency of this ray is to promote a synthesis in these conflicts and some next steps of what we call harmony. And with a deep relationship with this harmony through conflict is what we call dialogue or listening or diplomacy, which is the ability for us to understand one another mutually, even from different points of view. And as we are very childish as human beings in general, we tend to interpret that everything that is different from us is opposed to us. It's a natural tendency in us, isn't it? When something contradicts us or contradicts our preference, we see that as something opposed to us, rather than something that just shows a different perspective. And this ray then could bring really an understanding and an expansion of our consciousness if we could see from this perspective, which is different from ours. And the universe itself, life itself, our own emanation, ends up attracting something different from our perspective to test to what extent we can extract from that something that's equally edifying and positive, rather than see something in it that comes to contradict our will. So this ray is very important. And the tests and difficulties of this ray are precisely this difficulty reconciling. It's not just about reconciling with others. It's also reconciling within ourselves, positions that oftentimes come from different levels of ourselves. Our feeling perceives something from a certain perspective, but our mind judges from a different perspective. Have you experienced this? We feel something and think something else. So we live this conflict, this dissociation. So this test of reconciling this within us is typical of this ray. Another situation that we experience and causes a lot of suffering is an inner division on different levels due to this difficulty in seeing something amidst the whole. If we see something amidst the whole, if we do not see something within the whole, we do not know that it's part of the whole. But if conflict prevails in us, we do not become able to understand that the whole is not against us. The little part that we see is part of a whole. See how our nature is very dualistic, and to what extent we have to have a lot of patience with ourselves. However, knowing the nature of rays, we may eventually perceive the action of these rays in us, and we may deepen the genetics, the original genetics of this impulse of the rays. We may gradually lead this into a positive synthesis. Another aspect that this ray promotes in us when it's not mature is a tendency for becoming lost in details and to lose the sense of totality in something. So imagine if we have a third ray in our emotional body and the fourth ray in the mental body. Our life would be a chaos. If we don't conclude anything, many threads that are loose, And on the mental plane, we become lost in details that have no importance at all as compared to the whole. And sometimes we create for ourselves a problem because as we cannot see this action of race in us, we enter a crisis, which is a word that I understand is very childish. I create a problem that does not even exist. We are drowning, but the water has only 10 centimeters. Be calm. Look at what's happening. So this tendency for us to become lost in details is something very much mixed with the sixth ray also, but we'll get there. When we begin to open ourselves, to understand that there is not just my lens, which can be yellow or green or blue, and therefore everything I see is green, yellow, or blue, but there are other lenses, other filters in the interpretation or perspective. I start to open myself to this harmony, and I stop struggling with things that have different color, different shade, different perspective, which I need to value also. So this aspiration for having precision in this judgment in the good sense would help us a lot to find this harmony rather than slide or have difficulty in conflicts. The lineages want to be left aside. So the lineages that permeate or accompany this maturity of the fourth ray in the human consciousness are the healers. The healers, in our understanding of healers, is that consciousness that reconnects a rhythm, a level, with the original vibration or of a higher level or the matrix of that level. It reestablishes the correct vibration for a certain space. This is our understanding of a healer. So the fourth ray present in the lineage of healers is this ability or possibility for us to be spiritually trained to perceive this play of forces and harmonize them to reach a balance. Again, the lineage of governors is also under the enrichment of the fourth ray, precisely because it needs this ability of listening, the ability of diversity of horizons, of scenarios, always thinking of a government, not a material government, but the government that sees the evolution of a whole. Therefore, it needs to see the whole. So it's a ray that is hard to mature in this lineage within us spiritually, but if we do not seek this deepening of always seeing the whole, well understood, as long as our spirit is in this lineage, spiritually speaking. The guardians or servers, which is another expression of this conception of guardians, which are those who qualitatively define these states of consciousness. On a spiritual level, the guardian is attentive to the vibration of a certain context, the state of consciousness of a given context, and it gives limits so that a certain interference does not enter a certain space of this situation. And the guardian gradually matures, or the server, which is another expression of the guardian. Why server? Because it's the one that is there to serve a cause and watch that this cause, this state of consciousness, does not become interfered with or mixed with a vibration that does not correspond to it. And the mirrors, also this lineage of the mirrors, as we have seen, which is this inner and spiritual situation of being, reflecting, and allowing oneself to be transformed, that which projects onto the consciousness. So how can we be a mirror or reach this degree of transparency if we cannot transcend the tendency to conflict? If that which reaches us when it's different from our expression, instead of representing to us another expression of the whole, is interpreted by us as something that competes with us. How can we mirror something if we have this kind of interpretation? Again, these impulses are simply stimuli, so that among so many entries that we have mentioned, at least 30 or 40, we may become interested in a few or some, and will make our trajectory in the awakening of the consciousness. The fifth ray is a very different ray for humanity. We still have not discovered fully the potential of what we call science and knowledge, which, from the point of view of the science of the race, is this possibility for the human consciousness to understand the higher plane. Not understand it intellectually, but experience it, to unite the laws of different dimensions, to be creative before this understanding. And as we'll see, probably starting in May, when we enter the second stage of the public lectures, we'll enter a little more in this architecture, so to say, of what exists on the planet as an expression of the evolutionary plan. So this beginning of the year is to prepare our consciousness of those who are interested in these topics, and then later on deepen and reach the point of studying what exists on the planet on the subtle levels, which we as humanity still do not know. And I mention this because the nucleus, the matrix of this, so to say, where all this logics is born of the seven rays, is in the crown chakra of the planet, especially in the region of Alaska. We will also reach this aspect later. So returning to the context, this fifth ray, this quest, the continuous quest for knowing, to associate knowledge, to understand, but not from the intellectual, lower intellectual level. It's a different kind of understanding. In this time, it's leading our consciousness through the direct knowledge, or what is presented in the glossary as direct knowledge or the right consciousness, an entry of the glossary. And something that is fundamental in this logic that we call the fifth ray, which we do not know essentially, is science, true science, which would allow us to have today a different relationship with the kingdoms and a different understanding of the processes of the bodies and of the laws, physical, chemical laws, biological laws, metabolism, laws of creation, etc. So this scientific spirit is one of the expressions of what we call the fifth ray. And what helps us to find or identify the fifth ray in us is if we detect in ourselves this aspiration to know the truth, rather than deceiving ourselves, first ourselves, with this search for appearance, to pretend we are something that we really are not, see the distance we are from the fifth ray. So the fifth ray is a ray of a lot of authenticity. Things are the way they are. We are the way we are. And starting from this, will expand, will evolve, but within this logics of a higher understanding. It's a very important ray. So this aspiration to know and live the truth is one of the helps so to say, or virtues or genetics that we can invoke. Even if we do not have the fifth ray, it's a characteristic that all the seven ray have characteristics which are accessible and available to human consciousness. It's just a matter of aspiring to this. And another important point that the fifth ray allows us to have, which is very uncomfortable to the human consciousness, is this tendency to prepare and encourage our potential to expand our consciousness. So a true scientific spirit in us, if that continuous aspiration to discover something beyond, wanting to deepen into that topic, to deepen into that truth, deepen into that knowledge. Why? Because this ray is the one that prepares the expansion of our consciousness. And what is the expansion of consciousness? According to the Esoteric Glossary, it's when a higher level of ours awakens, starts radiating and leading a little more the energy of our vehicles. So the expansion of consciousness is not to receive a stimulus and to know something from higher levels in an artificial way. It's preparing my consciousness so that at a given point, led by the universe, I can contact higher levels that I cannot contact today. So it's a very important ray. And the tests around this ray is an excessive critical tendency, the construction of prejudice, greed, and curiosity in an excessive way. All of this prevents us from contacting everything that was said before about the virtues, so to say, or possibilities of the fifth ray. A mental activity without intuition is also a test and may lead us to distorted knowledge about reality. So if the fifth ray is immature in us, it can generate this mental distortion, and we may distort things. And who among us does not distort reality? Always something in us refracts reality and changes the understanding according to their own mental bodies. And the mental bodies is very much connected to the fifth ray, this ray of science and knowledge. And the lineages connected to the expression of this ray are the healers, the governors, the kingdomists. A lot in the line of what we saw in the expression of these lineages in the previous rays. In this time, which we are going through, our higher over-self or our higher self over-self, our soul is awakening with a lot of determination. The fifth ray would help us develop an intuition and a devotion to this level that is awakening. Why? Because we will intuit that there is something vaster than our concrete and mental knowledge. So it's a very important ray, but it disturbs, so to say, our human nature that tends to comfort, to the comfort zone, to what is already known, and this brings an atrophy of the possibility for the fifth ray to mature in us. So see, the next ray, which is the sixth ray, which is very important because it's the ray of devotion, fiery devotion, ardent devotion, this tendency of the human consciousness to identify an ideal or an object of devotion and place their consciousness in it, its consciousness in this. This is very close to our nature as we bring from our previous experience in Atlantis, the entry Atlantis in the glossary, a quasi exaggeration of this emotional body. Atlantis brought to human civilization, this excessive emotional presence. When we place our emotion, we immediately feel a relatively fluent movement, which does not happen with the identification of a thought. Our mind has a little more difficulty to enter this rhythm of knowledge or science. So, this ability to create bonds and identify what is best in the others is also a genetic trait that is very important in the sixth ray of the human nature. So you see how we have all the energies of the rays available to live, to experience, and to apply them in our lives. How different our lives could be if we understood and sought the sixth ray in us as the ability to create bonds and identify what is best in others and situations, rather than that critical finger all the time. Isn't it so? There always be things to be adjusted, but is it the only thing that the situations bring? Isn't there something that would depend on the expression of the sixth ray in us to be identified and nourished so that it might grow in others, even prevail over what is less positive? It all depends on seeing the good aspects in others. So another characteristic that is very positive in the sixth ray in this devotion is this ability that we have, humanly speaking, of wanting to become similar to more evolved beings than we are. A child want to be like, the child says, I want to be like my uncle when I grow up. It sees an expression of what it wants to follow. So a child has very naturally this sixth ray, this impulse to become similar to someone who, in our interpretation, is more evolved or a reference to us. The sixth ray, in its aspects of tests and challenges, something very common to identify, very easy to identify, which is an impulsiveness and a superficial adherence, an emotional adherence. When the sixth ray is not mature in us, we may have a tendency of an impulsive and immature adherence, uncontrolled affections, and out of proportions. That object of devotion grows too much before our quasi-idolatry. So you see how the rays combine, they would allow us to have a more organized human evolution within a certain situation of balance. When we see ourselves, and this is very common, and each one of us can clearly identify this, when we see attached to idealisms that are disconnected from reality and from context, we are channeling the sixth ray in a direction that in general does not even correspond to us. In the levels of consciousness, there is a level of consciousness of ideology. Ideology is not a matrix level. Above ideology, there are the archetypes and matrices. However, it's much more comfortable for human condition nature to contact an ideology, to identify with it, and stay there nourishing that ideology rather than contacting a matrix, because this matrix will return to us an impulse to manifest the matrix, and the ideology does not do it. It just nourishes a narrative, and through the narrative we feel as a part of that ideal. You follow the reflection, and as we feel as a part of that narrative, we feel it's enough. Do you perceive the trap that has been created to us? So we become imprisoned in ideologies, whichever it is. I'm not offending anyone, But we have to know that above the ideologies, we have the matrices and the archetypes. This is why also this race is connected, directly connected with the lineages of the sages, prophets, and instructors, because they gradually form the human consciousness to glimpse the trajectory to contact this matrix and this archetype, rather than becoming lost along the way. And the other lineage connected to this is the work with the kingdomists. Notice the distance that the human consciousness has today from the matrices of the lineages, so much so that most races have to do with the kingdoms. And we, for the kingdoms, do we really pay attention to them? So, these tests connected to this idealism and devotion are this impulsiveness, emotional and superficial adherence, attachment to idealisms that are out of proportion, unreflected and immature attitudes and actions. Does any of you has not had today an unreflected action today? Ask yourself, ask your minds to detect at what moments I have been immature and unreflective. And when we have excessively exaggerated personalities and we project onto others, this happens. So the works with the race is not something preparatory. It's a foundation for our evolution, for our self-knowledge. And if we want to collaborate with the evolutionary plan and with everything that the evolutionary plan implies, we have the race to dialogue with every day, at every moment, Something that is very dangerous of the sixth ray is that in this impulse that is not reflected and polarized oftentimes and not deepened of the idealism, we become fanatical. So instead of uniting to a matrix, and when we unite with an archetype, with a matrix, what descends is an inner security that completely disarms any need for convincing. I make contact with a matrix, with an archetype, and identify in it through the sixth ray as something true to me within my criterion. This brings me an inner security. So all kinds of impulsiveness and superficial adherence to things dissolve. This is very different when we contact a matrix or an archetype as compared with an ideological process. The sixth ray in us could work in the union of what we call the opposites within us. We'll reach this, we'll dedicate a sharing at a given point, perhaps in April. We'll work on what is the nature of our soul and why the soul, which is our inner world, has positive and feminine incarnations, because each personality will develop specific virtues of the one consciousness. The sixth ray, when it's mature within us, it promotes, fosters, and highlights, defines the best of each polarity within us. However, if in a human way it's immature, this is immature, we have a tendency to compete with what is opposed to us rather than coincide, reconcile, and complement. We'll reach that point later on. And the lineages connected to the sixth ray we have seen, sage, prophets, instructors, which is one lineage. This is very broad. It's the same channel of contact with matrices and archetypes in different ways, and the work with the kingdomists. And why kingdomists in the sixth ray? All of us know, we have seen devotion that the animals have. dogs, cats, horses. I remember here in Figueira that we used to have a horse called Pajas, a big horse. It had a natural body that was quite expanded. His devotion for the human presence was impressive. When he perceived that there was a human being giving some attention to him, even from a distance, we could feel how he approached it, as if he were addressing us, trying to communicate with us, because some species in animals, horses, elephants, dolphins, dogs, cats, some birds have the tendency to express this sixth ray in their instinctive body. Therefore, they feel when our emanation for them is constructive and positive also. So the work with the kingdom is very important, really important. And the plant kingdom, as we know, is always seeking the light and have a tendency to the light and always trying to seek the open space. It's an expression of the sixth ray. And to conclude, the seventh ray, which is the ray of order and ceremony, and it's a ray that develops through this movement, the ritualistic movement, so to say, not ritualistic as per an external ceremony, but as to the chain of actions and chain of dimensions also. So it's a very constructive ray, and this is why this ray has a lot to do with the Devic consciousness or elemental or angelic consciousness, which are these constructive hierarchies in the Esoteric Glossary, and they coexist with us, and we do not know them. And when we remember them, it's to ask for something for us through this practice that derives from Lemuria, which we call black magic. So this chain of different planes generates a magnetism. Where there is order, there is rhythm, we create a magnetism, a pulsation that gradually attracts the energies, the states of consciousness that have to do with what should be manifested in an orderly way. And it has to do with the kingdom is this seventh ray, because it's an approximation that is constructive of a hidden rhythm that the other kingdoms of nature express in a much better way than we do. Last year I was in the sequoia forest, woods, those trees that have an enormous diameter. Just imagine what permeates them as positive codes, how many decades it took for them to accumulate a code as a pulsation. So the plant kingdom really conveys a lot of the energy of the seventh ray. And when this ray matures within us in our understanding, we can be deeply helped, greatly helped to interpret and perceive and interact correctly with the rhythms of the universe. We feel this harmony. We have the need, a deep need to harmonize our rhythm with the rhythm of nature. This is typical of the seventh ray. So whoever has not been to a wood, to the top of a hill, or before a lake, in a situation where there is no demand, no external pragmatic demand, and this brings peace to us, isn't it so? This leads us to a rhythm. Our rhythm becomes one with that, and we want to be there looking at that horizon, that nothing, so to say, this rhythm, the seventh ray, this pure expression of nature that contains within it this seventh ray.
E algo muito importante
And something that is very important when the seventh ray matures in us is that we start identifying in our own lives, in our inner life, in our expression, traits or aspects of our reality that we cannot understand.
a realidade material, mas
Material reality, but we feel within it.
parece paradoxal.
It seems paradoxical. We enter this rhythm,
Identificamos
we identify with that even without understanding,
entregamos aqui
and we surrender to that. See how important the seventh ray is for us, how fundamental it is for us.
e
And
as linhagens que
the lineages that permeate this ray
são sacerdotes,
are the priests,
governantes,
the governors,
novamente,
again,
ministros.
and the kingdoms again.
Então vejam como nós estamos
So you see how we are far away as humanity
despertar e
from awakening and really working with the other kingdoms that evolve with us, that evolve along with us.
quando esse raio não é trabalhado em nós,
When this ray is
não é
not
imaturo em nós,
perfected in us, or when it is immature in us, we have a tendency to press situations and have an order that is external but it's artificial, or generate artificial rituals,
toda uma situação
which is creating an external situation that is empty, that has no consistency, which is not the original aspect of the seventh ray, which is interconnecting the different rays and in different planes and dimensions among as one. So this has no consistency and it's not connecting with other planes and putting us in contact with other levels or dimensions. And a very distorted aspect that we as human beings have as a karma created. See karma in the glossary, which is a very important law for us to understand so that we may help, that this karma may be balanced, dissolved, and our expression in this time that we live may be more fluent, is the topic of magic. So the seventh ray, as it has the characteristic of ceremony, of ritual, of the connection among planes, this, when it's polarized to an interest that is dissociated from a totality in the evolutionary plan, is considered magic. When we manipulate some situation through some ritual, through some situation, and we bring this self in a selfish way for our own benefit. So magic that exists on many levels is something that we have to visit the glossary to understand it well. There are three kinds of magic: the white magic, gray magic, and black magic. And the seventh ray is this energy that it's the same energy that, depending on how it is channeled or used, it'll be an instrument for white magic, for gray magic, or for black magic. So if we want to become liberated from all of this, we have to know, see, in one talk, in a dialogue, when we manipulate that talk towards the direction of our own interest, to some degree we are doing magic. We are creating a ritual through the word and narrative to lead the other to an interest that we have. So see how we have to observe our intentions and really have the courage to deny this movement when we identify it. Because one of the tests and challenges of this ray is precisely this, is the mistaken employment of language for a specific objective. So you see the karma that we as humanity create when many times a day, every day, we misuse our word and discourse leading
outro para uma outra
others to a different understanding.
compreensão. Realmente, esses sete
So
raios são
this
muito
seventh ray
importantes
is
para
real.
esse
These seven rays are very important for us to understand. Another difficulty and test when this ray, the seventh ray, is not correctly expressed within us is
uma falta de verdade.
a lack
Não
of truth.
conseguimos ser
We
verdadeiros.
cannot be true
Já manipulamos
because we
tantas
have
situações,
manipulated situations so much. We have manipulated so many dialogues that at a certain point we even lose our identity. We cannot no longer be true and authentic. So you see the importance for us to know this ray, and as we perceive some trait of behavior of these less positive aspects, as I said in the previous sharing, we cannot control, but we can refrain ourselves from using it. But we have to be in self-observation. And right after an automatic movement starts, when we nourish a trait of behavior, oftentimes it becomes automatic and independent. And as we see something starts acting, and if we are unattentive, this acts pretending it's me. Haven't you ever noticed, I have said something, oh, what have I just said? For sure it was not your consciousness or your best point. It's this which was nourished and gained a life of its own and did it instead of you. So we must not be dragged by this. We have to observe ourselves. Well, this content is very important. We'll see what contents will be for the next sharing of the next Saturday. And we are here at the community of Figueira at a very important moment. It started yesterday and will conclude tomorrow. I say this in public because you can make contact with this. It'll be placed at the end of the sharing, the QR code of the portal of Fraternity International Humanitarian Federation, which is this expression of the entire work created by Trigueirinho at the beginning of 1987. Today it's 25 affiliates, and we have many sectors that are also activities of these affiliates. So we are at a moment of this cycle, which we have studied in the previous sharings, the cycle of fructification, optimizing all the interaction of this expression of the Federation, of the Fraternity Federation, and we'll share with you a video that we recorded today in the morning, in reality 2 videos, and at the end you'll have the QR code for those who want to know the expression of the work. One of them is the IDIN Publishing House that disseminates the instruction of our work as a whole. You can point the camera of the phone, those who are watching, and make contact with the portal and reach one of these expressions that have to do with what interests you with this movement of the expansion of consciousness. So we'll see. So thank you, everyone. We'll see in the next sharing, but first let's see the videos. Good evening. Good night. We are here in this meeting of Fraternity Federation, International Humanitarian Federation, which is a meeting of the 25 sectors and affiliates that compose this group of activities and expressions of the lawful personality of the Federation. This meeting is very important because it aims at optimizing and creating a synergy that is even greater among the different expressions of each one of the affiliates and sectors, so that everything that we offer as a personality and for society may be on the level and quality that may meet the needs of the world. So the communities, the humanitarian missions, the plans of emergency, the light nuclei, the organizations of charity and service, there is a sector that takes care of this. The law sector that supports the affiliates and sectors such as the partners and also the partnerships on a public level, the sector of health, the third, the elderly age, and the sector of works, everything that composes this group of activities and sectors that aims at consolidating self-sustenance of the federation so that the activity sectors and services that it offers to the world and society as a whole may be at its best possible point in the best optimal level, both in terms of resources, quality, the law, the budget calculation, so that we may face this world situation in the world with so much heterogeneity, so that we may be a presence, a component that builds of credibility, trust, surrender, that develops, deepens what it proposes to live. So this meeting is a recycling of all this, and for sure when we have this in a mature way, and the strategic plans will make this known to the public and invite everyone to participate as volunteers or interacting with all of us in the different segments of the needs of society and the world, so that we may eventually create spaces that are a little more protected and constructive, in which development, transformation, evolution for the better may be the keynote and the idea. We'll keep you posted.